Congratulations, everyone. You've made it to the end of the day. Well, almost the end of the day. We have one more brilliant session left from a good friend of mine, Christopher Bergh, president of DataKitchen. Actually, he's founder, CEO, and head chef at DataKitchen. Chris has more than 25 years of research, software engineering, data analytics, and executive management experience. At various points in his career, he has been the COO, CTO, VP, and Director of Engineering. And I think all those experiences is why he started to focus on data ops and bring it to the industry. He's a recognized expert on data ops and co-author of the DataOps Cookbook and the DataOps Manifesto, and a speaker on data ops at many industry conferences. So looking forward to understanding what data ops is and how to do it right. So Chris, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you for that great introduction, Wayne. And I'm really happy to be here. I think this is my sort of 5th year of speaking at the MIT CDO. And actually, I started my professional career in 1990 working at a research lab associated with MIT, the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and working on an air traffic control project. And I spent about the first 15 years of my career kind of, working on software stuff. Sometimes there was data in the software, sometimes AI components. But I'm going to sort of tell you a story. And so that's actually a picture of my son when he was younger at story time in 1st grade. So the first part of my discussion is going to be a little bit of story about my background and what happened.
We're not, if you're sharing your slides, we're not seeing them.
Oh, that would be a help, huh?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And so we're going to do this story time. And so, I spent about 15 years of my career building software and managing software teams. And then I got this bright idea in 2005 that I would switch to data and analytics because I thought it was cool. And I thought, hey, as a big software guy, this data and analytics stuff was easy. And I joined a company that did kind of basically built data warehouses and reports and decision and data science models for the healthcare industry. And you know what, my life wasn't that great. And so I'm going to tell you a few stories to start off and then talk a little bit about data ops and why it is. And so, I had a bunch of people working for me. We had lots of customers, hundreds of different data sets. And, my kids were small. And I thought, oh, I'd sit at the soccer and I'd be able to get home by 5. Life will be easy. But, I kept getting interrupted because something would go wrong and I'd have to sort of leave the side of the soccer match and my wife would shoot me a dirty look and I'd have to go off and sit in the car or make a phone call and, fix something because things were inevitably breaking. And, I just never liked having, customers and talking to the VP of sales at a huge pharma company and saying, you know what, I'm sorry, we sent bad data to your entire 5,000 person sales team. I hear you. If we do it again, we're out. And it wasn't fun. And then, I had hired a bunch of really smart people. They were all really trying hard, but get people who they do stuff that I think is crazy. Okay, your customer requested something. So you put in this last minute change. They thought it was great. You have no idea if it works. You have no idea if it actually broke anything else, but you're okay because no one is called to yell at you. And so that's your way of proving things work. It's all right, something's sort of funny there. And I'd go into work in the morning every day and just sort of wait for these angry emails the data's wrong again, Chris, and I almost didn't want to open my email till I got to work because I was so frightened and sort of the morning blahs of worrying about data delivery and making sure everything's correct and right. And then, smart people want to do different things. And so we had the cool kids. Some people liked R and not Python, and some people liked Tableau and not Click. Some people liked Informatica and not just writing plain old SQL. And so everyone had their favorite tool and everyone, of course, wanted to do different things. And so, lastly, I sort of worked. I was the COO of this company, and the guy who ran it was a doctor, and he's a smart guy, educated at Harvard, knew a lot about healthcare, but didn't sort of know a lot about how to produce analytics. And he'd come up with a great idea of how to use data, and I'd sit with a data scientist and a data engineer, and we'd work on it, and I'd go back to him and I'd say, hey, David, we know what we're going to do. You know what? It's going to take us 2 weeks to get it done. And he'd sort of look at me like I had killed a patient on a table and said, Chris, I thought that should take 2 hours and not 2 weeks. And so, my life, it kind of wasn't great. And so finally, at the end, my wife was like, Chris, you're, and the way only wives who I've been married now to almost like 30 years can say, I can't take it anymore. You're complaining about work too much. Either fix the problem or quit. And so in some ways, what I'm talking about is kind of my life's journey for the last 15, 16 years now. And my co-founders and I have really, who were also at that company, are in this problem. And so trying to focus on the other things that happen in analytics. And I think the industry itself has this problem. And if we want to point to the evil that DataOps solve is failure. Because overall, most data projects, whether they're data science or AI or data warehouse or data lake or lake house, whatever cool term that you want to use, the process to get value out of the data, they fail. And some statistics are 40, some are 60, some are 80. And most of the things that actually go into production, there's huge issues with data trust and huge issues with errors. And everyone's hearing about AI and data science, but there's a lot of stuff happening, but not a lot of it's getting out there. And so really, the evil that we're trying to solve is failure. And I think as an industry, we have to reckon with that failure and what its root cause is. And for me, the root cause is really these problems that even today, one of the top insurance companies in the world, they've got this product that does telematics. They have no idea if the data is working, if the model's actually giving accurate predictions. They just sort of, the system runs, they don't know if they have any errors, and honestly, they don't know if it's working or not. And so most companies are like that. They just rely on their customers to QA their data and analytic products. And as a result, they have poor data trust and lots of errors. And the process to get things from the head of their very expensive data scientist and data engineer is labor intensive and slow. It follows a waterfall process, and it takes months to deliver value instead of really being focused on small bits of value, a tweak to a model, a new data set, a new change to a schema, a new report, delivering things incrementally, improving, and really sort of not seeing data and analytics as a construction project, but as a kayaking trip down a river of value where you're always pivoting and changing and learning. And that sort of value focus, I think, is important. And what we've done is put a name on it. And so it was interesting 5 years ago at this, I spoke in front of the audience. I think there was 200 people at the conference at MIT CDO, and I asked them if they knew what the term DataOps was. And maybe 3 people raised their hand, and one of them was my co-founder. And so I think this word is getting more used. And the reason that we chose this word is to do it is because it was already sort of in use, and it sort of combined some of the ideas that we're bringing together, which is sort of how the DevOps process and software made software be able to be delivered quicker with less errors, and how manufacturing companies, how Toyota actually produces a lot of great cars, and a manufacturing company near my house when I grew up in Wisconsin, American Motors, didn't, and went out of business. And so what DataOps is a set of technical practices and cultural norms and architecture that really focuses on these challenges. How do you enable experimentation and iteration and incremental value delivery to get information into the hands of your customer so they can react and your team can learn? How do you do that with incredibly low problems and error rates and its high data trust? And then how do you actually get people to work together and not sit in meetings all the time, and not have sort of Hatfields and McCoys between the database people and the self-service people? And then how do you, as a leader of prove that this is all happening, and prove in some ways your worth as a chief data officer? And so, what we focus on here, and if we think of it, is not data. And in fact, data is not really, maybe a poor name for data ops. It's really processes that act upon data operations. And so one of the processes that act upon data is your production process, how the sort of journey data takes from its source system to the end value, maybe a visualization or a model or embedded in some other operation systems. And that sort of factory metaphor, the manufacturing line of data, is what we focus on. Try to take that and produce really good cars. Work your production process like Toyota and not American Motors. And it doesn't matter what, from our perspective, it doesn't matter what the workstation is. Are you using a Hadoop cluster or a Snowflake? Are you writing in SQL or writing in PySpark? It just doesn't matter. It's the processes that act on the data and all those separate workstations and the manufacturing process that's really important. And can you do that consistently with low errors? And then the second process is, well, you're kayaking down a river of questions in data and analytics. And so how do you actually make changes to what you have in production quickly? How do you pick up a piece of that assembly line and tweak it and get it back into production? And we call that the deployment process. And that cycle time of deployment shouldn't be weeks or months requiring meetings and checkpoints. It should be automated and a button push. And you should be able to have regression tests and automation that makes all this work seamlessly and easy. And then the last part is just how your team works together. How can they develop? Two people sitting next to each other, or a team in Boston working with a team in New Jersey, and how do they actually work together, maybe when the team in New Jersey doesn't even work for the same organizational structure. And the combination of both teams is how they see value. And so this collaboration, both within teams and between teams on the value chain and analytics, is really important. And so, what we focus on is about automation of these processes and trying to make sure, and our focus, and what I believe why more and more companies are seeing that this is the path to break the cycle of data and analytic challenges that we've seen. The failure in projects, it doesn't come from a new server, doesn't come from moving to the cloud. It comes from really rethinking the only thing that you can control as an analytic leader, which is the processes and the systems that your team work in. And so it requires this focus on error rates and cycle time and collaboration and process measurement. And you know what, as we've shown, and we've done some surveys, and Eckerson has been part of them, by and large, most companies aren't doing that well. It takes them months or weeks to deploy a new line of SQL, or models are caught up. And most of the time, a lot of companies are sort of living with their head in the sand. They just don't want to know how many errors there are because they don't count, they don't check, and they just have the problem that no one trusts their data and no one actually uses their analytics. And we've come to believe that having lots of meetings and lots of technology review boards is fine. And honestly, most data and analytic leaders aren't very analytic about the work their team does. They just don't have reports and checks on the process. And it turns out that actually has really high cost. The cost is in rework, the cost is in low productivity, and the cost is in unhappy customers. And if you've ever sat in a meeting with your business counterparts and watched them roll their eyes at you, and say, or watch them hire some other team to do the work that your team should do, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And so I think, and what we've been showing over the years, is that you can think of this as a graphic equalizer on the left. And top companies can do all of this. They can push up the graphic equalizer, not in just one point, but you can deliver changes rapidly into production. And you can do that with low errors. And you can run your production line that produces data with very low problems. And you cannot have to sit in meetings all day. And you can produce a report that shows that you as a leader understand what's happening in your organization. And best-in-class companies do this. And the end result is actually you get a lot more done. So by not focusing on the work at hand, focusing on the systems and processes around work, you actually end up getting more work done. And so that upstream problem is what we're trying to focus on with DataOps. And we call that DataOps Transformation. And a lot of organizations have challenges with it, because if you go back and talk to your senior data engineer who's been in the business for 20 years, and you say to him, I want you to ship faster, he's going to say to you, yeah, I ship faster, we're going to have more errors. And then you tell him or her, I want less errors. Well, he's going to say, I'm going to have to slow stuff down. And he's going to see an inverse correlation between these levers. And honestly, I saw that for years. And the change in heart that comes from, why Toyota can not only produce great high quality cars, but they can actually change their manufacturing line and produce new models quickly, why Amazon and Google and other companies can change their code on their website thousands of times a day, and that website still works fine. and it still works flawlessly is because they focused on these process transformation steps. And so that's really the next part of my talk is like, well, okay, so you believe that the biggest problem in data and analytics is we haven't built the processes and systems in my team, and you're not going to go buy another database license and assume magic's going to happen, that you've got to work on these things. And so how does that happen? How do you make this work? And, a lot of you who attend the MIT CDO work in big companies, right? And so maybe you work in a big financial company or a big pharma company where there's sort of sleeves or silos of teams. You may have functional of like a big financial company may have banking and high net worth and insurance and brokerage. And you're over here kind of, maybe you work for the CIO, maybe you're parallel to the CIO, but you're over here kind of trying to influence what happens in these organizations. And the data and analytic organization may not all be under your control as a chief data officer. It may be embedded across all these teams. And so the question is, how do you actually make change and influence people to start doing data ops and try to get through their cynicism and get through their problems? And so that means you've got to put together a program and a plan of action to actually start data ops in your organization. And so that's what I'm going to talk about next, is like, how do you do that? How do you actually get all these steps together? And so in working with companies across multiple verticals, consumer packaged goods, large pharma companies, large financial service organizations, we've been over the past few years trying to help them make these steps. Because as a leader, it's a bit scary, right? Because maybe you've been around the block and you've like I have, just don't believe that buying a new tool is going to change your world. And you got to think, okay, I got to make my team run better. And the operating system for your team is DataOps. And so how do I make that happen? And so I think the first thing is that that's still a new term. You may, if I would do a survey now and ask how many people at the MIT CDO have heard of the term DataOps, I would be not surprised to say all of you have heard of the idea, but maybe your teams, and maybe you probably are going to have different definitions of the term. And so I think the first part that we're going to talk about is about education and demonstrating value and establishing a community around data ops in your organization, and then iterating and expanding. And we're going to walk through, there's a lot of words here, but we're going to walk through each column. And so the first part of DataOps transformation is like, how do I get this going? Like, how do I get something happening in my organization? How do I gain sponsorship? How do I spread the word? How do I formulate a long-term strategy? And how do I assess my organizational's readiness for data ops? And I think all these things they're program functions that happen when you lead a data and analytics team and you want to start making this sort of transformation. And so, the first part is really spreading the word. And we've written several books. Eckerson's written some great reports. Gartner has as well. And we've got some resources, some books, manifesto, videos to talk through about what's possible and to convince some of the people in the organization who may say, oh, this is just another fad, and that 20-year veteran who bristles when you say, yeah, you can deploy faster and you can run with less errors and you can do those at the same time. Convince them through examples that this is possible, and it's possible to push that graphic equalizer up. And then the second is, how do you gain executive sponsorship? Well, I think the first thing is start talking to your customers and looking at them and asking them, are you delivering on, is the analytic team delivering on its promise? Do you trust the data? Are we giving you enough insight? Do you have a layer of consultants and shadow teams doing the work, and sort of run to the cave, run to the fire and see where the problem is? And I think that's actually incredibly informative. And in my experience, in my lived experience, I had a boss who very much told me I sucked at it. And so I hated him at the time, but I thank him. He was right. We did suck, and we had to get better. And I think, I think you'll be surprised at the results, that, your customers aren't getting the insight and they don't trust the data, and they've hired other people to do what you think your team should be doing. And then the other part, sort of map the journeys that your data takes, and we'll just sit back and say, okay, where does it go? What happens? Look at what happened during it. Where have there been historic patterns of breakage? And which team owns which part of the process? And how well are you actually just responding to problems? Because you'll start to see patterns. And where things break, how often you have problems. It's a rare organization that we encounter that actually has a list of all the a list of the errors that have happened in their data and analytics process and over the last 6 months. And I think that's actually incredibly informative, and sort of love your errors. And I think just look at your development process. How, are you following, do you have a organization where sort of Agile and DevOps is standard in the digital or website or IT side of the organization? And they can deploy things at, your DevOps guy can deploy a tweak to your website while in the lunch line on the phone. And then, your data engineer goes, yeah, that takes me 3 months to get my new 10 lines of SQL into production. And so, and the DevOps guy goes, oh, wow, I just got 10 lines of JavaScript into production. Why can't you do the same thing? And so how long does it to create a development environment, et cetera? And so I think these sort of, you can start to look by uncovering, sort of running to the fire, and you can start to see some of the problems that you have. And then what I've seen sort of leaderships do is sort of define a strategy and say, okay, and this helps in organizations who already have made an agile journey on their IT side or their software side, and they say, okay, look, we want to make this similar journey, a similar transformation, and talk about, okay, how's the operating model going to be doing, what flavor of agile you're going to work, and how that's going to happen. And so I think in doing that, it also helps to sort of assess kind of where you are as an organization. And in doing that, we actually can help in that. So there's sort of, can you look at your maturity of DataOps? And so on our website, actually, in conjunction with Eckerson, we have a maturity model survey that you can just go take today. And we assess it on sort of 6 dimensions. And those 6 dimensions are, surprise, surprise, error rates in production, cycle time and delivery, collaboration, process measurement, and then 2 more: culture, how agile you really are, instead of sort of wagile or potentially agile. And then, like, what do your customers really feel? Are they happy? Do they trust the data? And we've gotten very interesting results, and a lot of companies don't score very well, honestly, on this. And I think this maturity can be informative, and actually can be a way that, by surveying and talking to people, it can help you kind of assess sort of where to start. And, and I think these are really one of the biggest challenges in making these organizational changes is how to use information not to shame and blame, but as an opportunity for a discussion and an opportunity for improvement. And, I think there's a lot of organizations who want to hide their challenges, but I think by using assessing and talking, you can actually use this as a way to help your organization move forward. And so the second part is, how do you make this happen? Is like, how do I find a use case? And like, how do I get a structure to make it expand in the organization? And then how do I organize teams? How do I staff it? And so I'm going to talk about that as sort of the latter part of DataOps transformation. And there's a lot of ways to organize teams to do work in an agile way. There's the scaled agile framework, there's the Spotify model, you go to, well, what used to be a bookstore, and you could find a whole wall of books on agile. And so there's, how do you organize your team? And I think there's to do DataOps, that it's not prescribed a particular framework of working in an agile way. There's a lot, and lately there's been discussions of the role of the data product manager as a proxy for your customer, and even the role of a data mesh way of organizing your team, which is again another idea that comes from domain-driven design and small group leadership. So that's definitely part of a plan. It's like, how are you going to organize yourself? And then, well, how much of the staff do you need to actually do DataOps? And here's a thing that I think is interesting for a lot of people. So these upstream processes, how you automatically test things, how you automatically deploy things, how you automatically build test data in environments, how you actually measure how much work is being done, and productivity and collaboration. Think of it as sort of 15% of your effort. And 15% was shocking to some people. But if you actually look at it from a software team standpoint, on the average, it's 28% of their effort is involved in DevOps, which is a similar set of activities where the option of those, the target of those activities is writing, Java code and HTML and JavaScript front ends for a web-based application. And so it does take some effort, and those you don't have to staff people full time. You can devote some of your existing, but writing tests and creating automation scripts is work that needs to be. And a DataOps engineer is a role that a lot of organizations are creating as a separate role. And I've been tracking now for years the occurrence of the DataOps engineer as a function in organizations, and we're seeing more and more. And so, the DataOps is an upstream problem. So devoting resources to solving that upstream problem, to building the automation to make it work, is worth the effort, because it's going to play in the fact that you are going to get more velocity out of your individual contributors who do the data science and the data engineering, the visualization and the governance. They're going to be able to do more work. And so it's an investment in a future return. And there's different patterns now for how to get, if you've got a large company, and how do you get a lot of people to start working in an agile way and start adopting the principles of DataOps. And there's some a set of technical tools that you can use. These tools to like Git for version control, or my company has a software product that can help. There's a whole market now of companies who are around doing sort of functions in the DataOps ecosystem, and now there's terms model ops and ML ops. And then there's models of like having a center of excellence or a dojo where there's a team who's trying to help the organization make this, make this work. And maybe it's a devoted team or a virtual team. And there's differences between COEs and dojo models, but they're all about how do you sort of embed this transformation with a team whose goal it is to make it happen, and how do they actually keep going. And so, and then the last part is I think measurement is incredibly important from obviously because I'm in the data industry, but measurement of your processes. Well, how many errors are you having in production? Are you meeting your SLAs? Is the data late? Is the data processing done on time? How many deploys have you made? How much tickets have you closed? What's your test coverage? These sort of process measurements, I think, are incredibly important, and also can provide good leverage to people who can start to see, who are the cynical side, and they can start to say, hey, look, I add more tests, I can deploy more frequently. Maybe I should add more tests and I can deploy more frequently. And I get less problems. There's some relationship between tests and automations and my life going better. So, if they can see that in a report, they can actually start sort of getting the religion on this idea of automation and testing. And so at the end, so what are the keys? Well, if DataOps is in general sort of part of the sort of agile total quality management, and so it's an incrementalist thing. It's not about go fast and break things. It's or go fast and be out of control, or go slow. It's this middle ground between those two. And so as a result, sort of avoid big bang changes. Don't spend a year trying to prepare to do DataOps. Start doing DataOps right away in small demonstration projects. And then just don't ignore the soft things. A lot of people are looking for proof. There's a lot of pushback, and there's a cultural part to it. And so to do that, you've got to help measure the benefits of DataOps and say that it works. So I think these are, at least what we've seen, some of the keys to DataOps transformation. And so, let me just talk about an example of a company here, a pharma company. And so, as everyone knows, it's sort of like super expensive to bring a new drug to market. Like only a fraction do. It's like multiple billions of dollars. And so anything that can increase the velocity of ideas in the drug discovery place into actual products is just worth a lot of money. And so, there's a large pharma company who kind of wants to help people use the tools that they want to do. And so they are actually multi-cloud. They're on GCP and Azure and AWS. They have their own on-prem environment, and they've got different tools. So one of the interesting things about scientists and drug discovery teams is it's very data intensive, but they also have very much their favorite tools. Some groups like Airflow, some scripts like Tableau, and some people like to write Python. And so how do you actually get these people to have some sharing and consistency and reuse? Because one of the challenges that ends up in these organizations is you've got two teams who are kind of working together. Maybe you've got a team in New Jersey who's got a large Spark cluster with genomic data, and then you've got some people working in Azure who want to take advantage of that genomic data, but also have their own, and they also have different tools. And so how do you actually get them to work together, right? Where what happens in New Jersey doesn't break what happens in Azure, and not have to have meetings and documentation and formalism. How can you automate that process? So if I make a change in New Jersey, I have automated regression tests that tell me I'm going to break my Azure thing, my Azure part. And my Azure team has got a whole bunch of tests that tell me, on the other hand, that the New Jersey team has broken something. And so this isn't about collaboration through meetings and let's all hug and yada, yada, yada. It's about writing code that actually makes this collaboration possible. And so, like, this is just this case of how do you just measure schema drift between two teams that cause delays and errors and problems. And I think that the challenge is you've got to build a collaboration platform where they both can work, where the really interesting IP, the intellectual property in data and analytics, is not the data. The interesting intellectual property is the things that act upon data, the core and configuration. And can you put that in one place? And can you give the ability to have that work together, where the New Jersey people can, in a development environment, run what the people in the cloud are working to see if there's any regressions or problems, and be able to have that sort of process governance, process storage in a shared space where people can have all their processes that act upon data in one place. And this sort of enterprise data ops platform is what they're trying to do. And the benefit here is, like, if you're going to make use, if you're going to try to have, at a big picture, we spend a lot of time on data lakes and let's get all the data available. And that's fantastic. And I'm not knocking that. But I want to have a data lake for the processes that act on the data. Let's have a place where all the processes that act on the data are in one place, and that they can have a common way to tell if they've run, and a common way that people can see them and branch them and use them and reuse them. And that sort of like idea of focusing on those ideas are useful. And and what we've seen with companies who've done this, and especially on the commercial pharma side, is that sort of having that sort of process hub across a whole team can just be incredibly powerful. And so we did this with Celgene and the Otezla launch. And in any sort of pharma launch, there's sort of hundreds of data sets, lots of money, lots of people, and being able to make changes every day, adding new data sets, tweaks, and hundreds of schema and views and reports, and being able to do that with 7 people it's amazing. I've seen organizations have literally 10x the size of organizations doing this, and doing 1/10 the work. And so by following these principles, what happens is your teams then focus on the really good stuff, and they can be empowered to make that changes. And they, it's the sort of idea that just adding more people doesn't work. And so I think that I've seen this to be an incredibly powerful and incredibly efficient and productive way to do, with low errors. And here's an organization that pushed everything up. So lastly, we've got a software tool that helps you get through this journey, as well as consulting services around it to help you get there. And so my name is Chris Bergh. You can reach me at chris@datakitchen.io at our website. That's misspelled on the slide, and I'm going to fix it now because it's going to bug me. I want to see if there's any questions I can answer for you.
Yeah, Chris, a couple of questions. I liked a lot of your presentation. I've obviously heard you speak quite a few times. New insights on how to describe data ops in a very tangible way. A hub for your data processes. I haven't heard that before. That's pretty good.
I'm always, you know me, I'm always like trying out new metaphors. And actually it's been useful at one customer because the data and analytic team wants the hub, right? And I think they, as you get more and more people interacting with the data, having all that work on the code, configuration, SQL, Tableau documents, models in one place that people can see and use and run and reuse is really valuable. And so, I mean, and that's why software developers use version control, right? Having it in one place. Clean your mess, put it in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have seen there is a correlation between test automation and I guess what was the correlation you just mentioned? Test automation and productivity, I suppose.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that's, so if you see like these examples of like, how do you make these, have your teams go up, and like, this is where, being able to run quickly, right? Being able to take a new model, a new set of data transformation code in Informatica, a new visualization, a new description of the data, all the parts, and being able to put those into production quickly and know ahead of time that they're going to work. Not afterwards, but know ahead of time. And there's this term that I like called pull the pain forward. And what happens with a lot of our individual contributors is that the pain isn't pulled forward. They make their change. They tweak the model, they tweak it, and then weeks or months later, they find out if there's a problem, or maybe they don't at all. And so you've got to pull the pain forward. They've got to be able to see the effect of their local change on a much bigger system. And so that's the, and then what's the definition of done for your team? And to me, I think the definition of done is not I have completed my ticket. It's that it's in production and that it's getting value for your customer. And so by kind of thinking about things in a different way, I want to make rapid changes. I want to be able to pull the pain forward. I don't want to hope things work. I want to know that it works. And what done and success means to me is not a ticket done, but a happy customer, and that focus on value. Those small things can, in my mind, those ideas lead you to wanting to build testing that checks and tests not only in a development testing where, but also in production operational testing, and to make sure that you don't have bad data that's passing through, or bad data or bad code that got in.
Okay, last question here. You mentioned ML ops and model ops, and now we've got infinite number of ops. Are you responsible for this ops deluge?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, you can blame me. Yeah, if you put an ops on it, you're cool now, apparently. So
Yeah,
the ops
evidently.
suffix makes you a cool dude, which is surprising because I'm like the definition of not cool. I'm not cool.
But tell me what is it? Okay, DevOps might have preceded you, but people know what that is, right? But now we've got DataOps, ML ops, and model ops. Just take those three. Is there a real difference in your mind or not?
Well, I don't care what ops you call it. I just want you to do the activities that are around it, right? I want you to not wake up in the morning and dread going into work because things are broken. I want you to have not your customer roll their eyes when you say it's going to take 6 weeks to get something done. Like that's what I want to stop, because I suffered that pain. Yeah. And so you can call it, Bob and Dave's fancy ops as far as I care, but like focus on not hating your job when you go in the morning because things have broken, and automate the hell out of that. And then second is like, make sure that you can change stuff really fast and it works. And those processes, those steps, in general, you could call them model ops or ML ops or data ops or DevOps, and there's mixes, and analysts are creating new terms. And so I don't care what you call it. It's the mental focus to say, this is what I'm going to focus on, and I can solve this problem. I don't have to live this way anymore. And I don't have to have my wife give me a dirty look and say, fix it, Chris, or get a new job. And so that's all. That's my emotional motivation, because in 2008, that was my life.
Well, excellent, Chris. Wonderful job. Very clear explanation of data ops and how to get started and what benefits it can bring. So audience, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And this is it for the conference for today. Hope to see you back tomorrow. And with that, have a great rest of your day and a fine evening. And thank you again, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. Have a great day. Thank you all for attending.